And just so everyone knows, we are recording this. So if you need to come back to it for any reason, or if you have to leave early, or if anything happens with your connection, we will be recording it. So you can always come back and reference it. So sorry for the late start. I guess we should always anticipate technical difficulties with things like this. And this is the first webinar I've ever actually hosted. So there could be other technical difficulties, just warning everybody. Thank you for being patient. So I'm Amy. I think we've all talked or emailed or communicated in some way or met in person before this. And after this many months of planning, I'm really excited that we're finally getting started. We're getting to the meat of this project, this very exciting community archiving workshop. So this is our first session, the official session of the Midwest version of the Community Archiving Workshop Training of Trainers. So again, just thank you all for being part of this. Thank you for taking your time. I know it's really hard to schedule something like a webinar that lasts 90 minutes in the middle of the week, and we're doing it twice, and the 3-day training. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate that and couldn't do this without you. So the webinar today will be led by myself and Jeff Martin. Jeff, I think you're, we'll all introduce ourselves later. So Jeff will have a chance to talk, but I just wanted to do a shout out.
I will.
Okay, so the webinar today is really to just kind of get us thinking about the project, to introduce you all to the concept of community archiving workshop again, and go over our timeline together, and just some logistical things, but also some theoretical things about how this started, why we do it, why we think it works. So this project is funded by the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and it is being administered through AMIA, the Association of Moving Image Archivists. So they are the ones who are going to be distributing money to you when that comes up. Recollection Wisconsin and the UW Madison libraries are serving as our joint anchor site. And similar projects are happening in California and in Tennessee. So those groups also have an anchor site, have 3 regional partners, and are going through the same process as we are right now. And those groups have already done their trainings, so we are benefiting from everything they've learned so far, which is great. Okay, let's move on. So if you've had a chance to look at the videos that I sent out in the email last week, you'll start to have a sense of what a community workshop is, a community archiving workshop is, and what the workflow, the rhythm are about, and sort of the types of collections, and also the camaraderie that is built around this sort of work. This is really part of a larger global project that you are now all a part of, which is very exciting. And so here we have some images of past workshops to give you a sense of the different places and environments that the workshops have been done in. So in the upper left, that is a workshop in Oaxaca that was done at a community media center called Ojo de Agua Comunicación in conjunction with the first gathering of audiovisual archivists. On the up top right, that's a workshop that took place in Savannah, Georgia. And that was a partnership between the Georgia Historical Society and a youth media theater group called All Walks of Life. So we brought two local groups together to work on a project together. And that one was part of one of the AMIA conferences. In the bottom left, that's a workshop that was organized in Manila by the Library School at the University of Manila and the Southeast Asia Pacific Audiovisual Archives Association. And then next to that, Richmond, Virginia, that was a workshop also part of the AMIA conference at the Valentine Richmond History Center and the Virginia Commonwealth University Library. And finally, in the bottom right, that's a workshop that was done in Pittsburgh at the Attack Theater City of Asylum group, and also with the independent filmmaker David Newell. David Newell is a Pittsburgh native. You might also know him by his stage name, Mr. McFeely. He played Mr. McFeely on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, so we got to help him with his film collection, which was really exciting. So this is just to give you a sense of the different types of collections, different types of collaborators, different types of environments. As you can see, they happen in really traditional, like historical societies archives, but also outdoors in different, in like more art spaces, more community spaces. Like the options are really limitless given some parameters. Obviously, we're working with archival collections, but really it can be done with lots of different types of partners and different types of communities. So now we can see the current map of all the places we've done workshops throughout the world. So this movement has collections and passionate caretakers in all corners of North America and across the globe. There have been 20 workshops in 16 communities and 6 countries. And actually that number is higher now because we've had more as part of this project that have already happened that haven't been added to this. So the idea for community archiving workshops started in 2009. And it really was coalesced around the realization that around these conferences, the Association of Moving Image Archivists conferences, there were all of these audiovisual archivists in one place, in one city. So perhaps there was a way for us to help the city that we were coming to, help local archives, community centers, etc. So that initial idea, the first call was in 2009 or 2010, has now become an annual pre-conference workshop at the EMEA conference. It happens every year. And the idea of using this type of workshop to teach people to do more workshops themselves gradually evolved. So other people took the idea and organized their own workshops with their own communities or as part of other events. So for instance, through NYU, there's a program called the Audiovisual Preservation Exchange. It's APEX for short, and they've traveled around the world doing workshops like this with groups of students in particular. There has been a workshop at the National Council of Public History Conference. Last year, we did a workshop at the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, just south of the Twin Cities. And there's also been a workshop at Cine, Oaxaca. So it's a model that's really easily adaptable. And we've really tried to provide resources so people can do it themselves. So we provide a lot of templates, a lot of guidelines, because the original group that organized this doesn't really feel a sense of ownership. We want people to run with the idea. Okay, so now that evolution has brought us here, where we're doing this focused 2-year project to train even more people how to run these workshops. And the idea is you'll learn how to run the workshops at the same time that you can benefit your own collection. So you'll gain control over your audiovisual materials at the same time that you're learning how to run a workshop, getting to know members of your community better, etc. So when our project is done, which our completion date is supposed to be September 2020, the map will look like this. Hi, Dustin. Made it. We can see you.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we keep on with this each one teach one model, we'll pass along training and skills in order to preserve everyone's audiovisual heritage. And we like to think of it as, as we all do in the field of libraries and archives and history, that we're saving stories. And we're saving the stories that will have an impact on what our children and our children's children learn about our shared past. So that's our bigger mission here, is to just save audiovisual materials and stories. Okay, so that was just our little intro to the webinar. And here's what we're going to do today together. we're going to do introductions. That's going to be a big part of our time today, is just getting to know each other, getting comfortable with each other, learning a little bit about our institutions and our collections. And then Jeff's going to talk to us about more about why community archiving workshops is a model that works and some of the guiding principles behind the workshops. And then I'll jump in and we'll talk more about our timeline and our work together for the rest of the summer and beyond. So we're going to start with introductions. So here is a map of the organizations that are participating. Jeff and I are going to do quick introductions, and then Emily and Sean are here to talk about our anchor site, Recollection Wisconsin. Kat Fan is here to talk about the UW-Madison archives. And then I'd like each of the regional partners to introduce themselves and talk about your collections, your organization, I mean. So the introductions are really important, but they also, we want to keep them short, just to be respectful of everyone's time. So we're asking that each group talks for 5 minutes, and only one person from each group really needs to talk about the institution. So we're going to try to keep the conversation moving. Okay, and I won't be too strict about it, I promise, but I will cut you off if I need to. Okay. So, whoops, this is loading. Let's see if this comes up. Well, that was a picture of Jeff and I, but I guess that's fine. That doesn't show up. So I'm Amy, and I think I've talked to you all before, like I said, but just one thing of introduction that I'll mention is that when this project started, I was living in Wisconsin. I was living in Madison and was the archivist at the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research. But since I've taken a new job, so I'm no longer in Wisconsin, but I'll be coming back for the trainings. But just so you all aren't too skeptical of me now that I don't live in Wisconsin anymore, I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin. I love the Badgers. I'm not really too big into football, but like I'll always cheer for the Packers. So I'm now based on the East Coast, but like I said, I'll be coming back for the trainings. And I have a long background in audiovisual archives and film in particular. So Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, there, now I'm unmuted. Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Martin. I'm based in Chicago, so I guess Wisconsin adjacent. But I work freelance as an audiovisual archivist and media art conservator. I got my degree from NYU, from the Moving Image Archiving Preservation program there. And I've worked with lots of different collections around the country, but I've also worked with the community archiving since the second one. I wasn't the first one in Philadelphia, but consistently. And they're really important to me as an archivist. They've been really important in teaching me the value of, like Amy said, about preserving and maintaining stories, and about how important it is and how just satisfying and enjoyable it is to share knowledge as a community and as a group. And so these are really important to me. Amy's really the leader on this. I'm here as a consultant, but I'm here to do whatever I can to make sure things go as positively as they possibly can. So that's me.
Thanks, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Emily and Sean, if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Sure, thanks. I'm sorry I dropped out for a minute. I was having my own connection problems over here. So I'm Emily Fotenhauer. I'm the program manager for Recollection Wisconsin. And I've been working with the program for 10 years. I started there in 2009, and we've grown and evolved a lot. And we are based at WILS, Wisconsin Library Services, which is a little nonprofit based in Madison, although we all work remotely, which is why you can see Sean and I are in separate spaces in our own houses. And we work primarily with digital collections. We don't actually hold any physical content, but we work to bring together metadata records about digital collections. And one of the areas we're really hoping to grow our digital collections are in audiovisual resources. And even though this program isn't specifically about digitization, digitization is really ultimately the way to preserve a lot of at-risk analog AV collections. So we feel like this is a really valuable sort of tie-in and foundation for what we're doing at Recollection Wisconsin.
Great, thanks, Emily. Sean, are you still here?
I am, yeah.
Oh, great, great.
So I'm Sean Vesley, and I'm working with Wills on a project called Listening to War, Digitizing Wisconsin's Wartime Histories. And we are digitizing different oral histories that were at risk of being lost from our partner sites all over the state. Happy to say that everything's digitized now, and we just received our hard drives this week, so I'm really excited to pick those up this afternoon and get working on that. I graduated from library school here in Madison, and Amy was actually my student advisor while I was there, so it's really nice to get a chance to work with you again, Amy, and get to meet everybody else here.
Great, thanks, Sean. Next, Kat, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh. Okay, we'll skip Kat and we'll come back to her. Dawn and Annika, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah. I'm Dawn Sherr-Tomei, and I'm the curator of the anthropology collections. And
I'm Annika Mandeltort, and I've been working with Dawn as her intern and special projects assistant for the past 4 years.
Great.
so, oh, is that all you wanted at this point?
No, sorry. I got ahead of myself. Keep going. Tell us about your institution.
Okay, so we're a major natural history museum with over 4 million objects in the collections. This particular project, it was so fortuitous because I'd already reached out to Emily and Amy before, because we were starting on a new endeavor, and this is the third time I've tried to approach digitizing this collection. And do you want me to talk a little bit about the collection at this point or for later?
Let's save it for later.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up is Greg and Crystal.
Hi everyone, I'm Greg Koken. I am the head of special collections and archives here at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, joined by...
I'm Crystal Schmidt. I am the cataloger at UW-Eau Claire Special Collections, and I graduated from UW-Madison in 2013. And my job is basically to make metadata records for original cataloging collections and other materials that we have here. I'm excited to learn more about film preservation for sure.
Yeah. And I'll add that I'm an '09 graduate of the library school at UW-Madison, also a Blue Gold, so I got my undergraduate degree right here at UW-Eau Claire in the mid-2000s. Just a little bit about special collections and archives. We are affiliated with the Wisconsin Historical Society as one of their 14 area research centers. So a large portion of our collections, predominantly manuscripts and public records, not a lot of AV, are owned by the Wisconsin Historical Society. We preserve and provide access to them here in Eau Claire because they are mostly related to Northwest Wisconsin. And then we also have a lot of locally owned collections, the university archives, rare books, a lot of materials like that. And that's really where we find a lot of our AV materials. A lot of oral histories on everything from cassette tape to reel, as well as VHS, U-matic, you name it. We've got it, and largely have an idea what to do with it, but don't have the resources.
Great, thank you. Okay, how about Dustin and Jan?
All right, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Hey, score one. So I'm Dustin Mack. I'm the chief curator for the History Museum at the Castle. I got my PhD in history from the University of Oklahoma in 2016. So I'm more used to using archives than I am to actually, trying to coordinate or function as a library professional. And that's why I have Jan here with us, and I'll let Jan tell you her background.
I am a retired corporate archivist and now currently volunteering here at the museum at the castle. And we do have an audiovisual collection, and we do have tapes and oral histories in the collection, and that is one of my concerns on the audio cassettes. There's some wonderful information on there and concern what will happen to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And we're going to jump back. Kat, are you?
Hi, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Maybe? Okay, good. Sorry, I've been having technical difficulties. Hi, everyone. I'm Kat Fahn. I'm at the University Archives here at UW-Madison. I'm the digital and media archivist. I've been here in the archives for about 2 years now, and I am new to AV archiving, like many of you, so this has come at a good time for me as well. So the collections have been a little unevenly taken care of over the years, so I'm at a point where I'm trying to get them into better shape. And as Emily mentioned, we're also thinking about sort of the preservation, so transferring a lot of our collections as well. And I'm excited to have you all here in Madison.
Okay, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. And I know digitization isn't like necessarily part of the title of our project, but as some of you mentioned, with audiovisual material, digitization is often the end goal. So really we're viewing this as the inventorying and intellectual and physical control is all leading towards digitization. And that's why Recollection Wisconsin is a really great partner for us with this project and the ongoing nature of this project, because Emily and Sean are the people you can talk to about getting your stuff online if that's what you need help with. So that group will sort of like usher us into the next steps here if you need it. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump back. So I'm gonna hand it over to Jeff now, and he's gonna talk with us about the why of community archiving workshops. We can't hear you, Jeff. Are you there?
Oh, I'm just muted. I'm sorry. I'm on a squeaky chair, so I've been muting myself. Yeah, so Amy, I'll let you know when the next slide. So you can bring up the next slide. The workshops really are, as it says, a catalyst for the preservation of endangered audiovisual media. And, the goal is for the collection's custodians, owners, whatever the proper word is in your institution, to understand the content and its needs. And we're focusing, obviously, really on the audiovisual component, which we'll touch on in a minute. But it's about understanding what is there, getting an item level understanding of what is there, and then with the ultimate goal of prioritizing and understanding better the collection needs. So maybe that's the next slide. So yes, like I said, the idea of getting the material out, getting item level information about the material, it really shows what the risks are. I mean, a great deal of what has happened at community archiving workshops in the past, and the thing that's been very beneficial is having the material out together to be physically examined, because you start to learn things by looking at the physical objects, not even just on an individual basis, as sometimes happens where, say, a request comes for a digitization of a specific item, but see everything together, and you start to learn things about how videotapes were labeled, for example, how they were described. You learn a progression of the collection over time. And I think that's another critical thing that the workshops will help to do. So the next slide is about that, the prioritization to begin preservation. And as Amy says, when we're talking about preservation, we're talking about digitization. And ultimately, what we're really talking about is something that I think people have been touching on already, is about access. You know, the ultimate goal is getting in the audiovisual materials into a form that is understandable, that is organized, trackable, with the ultimate goal of moving it into a place where it's accessible to the community. You know, that's the reason the community is the first word in the project, because it's really about both building a community that can be caring for the works together, but also about getting the works back out to the community. I think that, to me at least, that's really the heart of the project, is that two-way process. A community is coming together to care for a collection, and is also working to get the collection back out to a community. So our next slide is just that, about building a network of support and about sharing skills and knowledge. Like Amy said, the cause, as we haven't referred to them yet as cause in this conversation, I don't think, but that's what we're going to be calling them. It's just the acronym we've come up with, and that's what it is, their cause. It is about sharing skills and knowledge, and about passing it on from the audiovisual archivists to the archivists or caretakers at the community level, and then passing that on again to people within the community, and hopefully being able to hold cause outside of this project, the ultimate goal. And the next slide, which I'm looking at here, you know, that's the other thing that the cause in the past I think have been really helpful to the local organizations with. It is an opportunity to have a very specific thing that brings in allies and volunteers, whether it is people within the community who have technical knowledge, everything from people working with digital reformatting who are local and they are part of a community, to people who may have been doing this and are retired and are willing and able to work as volunteers, but also creators. In many cases, the cause have brought in not just the caretakers, but the creators. And to have that dialogue really enhanced in a very specific way, I think has been incredibly helpful. And our next slide is that just what I've been talking about, or hinting at, is the opportunity to build awareness and interest about the collections outside of the institution. You know, an opportunity to say, these are the things we have. Would you be interested as a volunteer to come in and help us care for it? And also to, once the collection's contents are really clearly known, to build outside awareness and interest about the collections, which can only lead to further care and support of their preservation. And again, as I said before, access above all else, I think, is really my sort of guiding principle about these things. And our next slide, why the urgency? And this is still my portion, right, Amy?
Yep.
And you're going to jump in whenever.
Yep.
But you can move on to the next slide. But I mean, I think that image right there does show what a lot of people who work with these collections understand, the why of the urgency. It comes down to everything from physical decay to loss of intellectual information. And when you see, for example, tape labels falling off, that starts to become loss of information. Talking specifically about audiovisual materials, one of the most critical things, particularly with tape, whether audio tape or videotape, is obsolescence of equipment. We're looking here on the left at a U-matic video cassette, which, you know, judging by the label, probably dates to the mid-1970s. And on the right, on the deck, that you need to play it back, which has probably been out of production about 20 years at this point. There are an awful lot of them out there, but the knowledge, skills, and expertise to keep them going is becoming increasingly rare. And so it's essential to take advantage of the knowledge, skills, and expertise and access to the equipment while we have the time to do so. And the next slide is we're also racing against time in terms of inherent deterioration. On the right, magnetic media, that's a VHS cassette that, as you can see, has some rather serious mold issues, something we'll be talking about more specifically, I'm sure, in the future. And on the right, film, 16 millimeter film that's been water damaged. There's deterioration that happens during storage, no matter what, whether the materials are accessed or not. And then there's things like mold and water damage that represent contamination. And part of the process, too, is doing what we can to arrest the deterioration and to identify works that may have been contaminated or that show signs of deterioration so that they can be prioritized for preservation. The next slide is the other fact that is inherent in audiovisual collections, because they're physical carriers, like a videotape or an audio tape or a film that has to go through a machine. Everyone over a certain age has had a VHS tape get eaten by their VCR. Take that idea, expand it throughout the idea of a collection. These materials get damaged physically. Identifying those that have been physically damaged, again, can help prioritize those that need to be moved to the front of the line for preservation or digitization. And our next slide is the thing that I was getting at in that very first slide, is loss of information. Here we see fragile and flaky tape labels. I think anybody who's got an audio-visual collection has seen this sort of thing. And also, the reason that I talked a little bit about the importance of this being a community project, and when possible, thinking about and talking about bringing in creators, is looking at tape labels like this. I don't know the source of this photo, and I definitely don't know what BC operation is. And it's certainly not uncommon to have materials in a collection that have labels like this. It really is difficult to understand what they might be. So we can look at this and say, this picture, for example, this is 3/4 inch videotape. It's likely experienced some deterioration over time based on the fact that it's an obsolete format. Access to the videotape playback decks is going to be difficult to find increasingly. And then the loss of whatever intellectual control you might have over them, which in a lot of cases is simply based on what is written on them, that also becomes really critical. There's nothing, and all AV archivists have seen it, there's nothing more disheartening than opening up a box of film cans that is a bunch of cans and then a bunch of paper labels that have fallen off and are sitting in the bottom of the box. It's just, more common than, it's incredibly common. And so part of this is arresting that process, nailing down as much information as possible about the collection's objects in a form that can be migrated into the future in a much more reliable way than tape labels will be. And our next slide is about the other aspect of this, which is the older records. I've just been working on a project where I spent a week going through paper logs at a TV station here in Chicago. And how I did it to try to find the materials I needed is I took out the binders for 1983 to 1987 and I looked at every single page. And I'm an audiovisual archivist and researcher, so I thought that was awesome. That was like a really great way to spend a week, was just going through old tape logs. But that was all the information that this station had. And I don't know if anybody had been looking at those tape logs in years to find out that, wow, there's some amazing things here. So instead of me going through as an individual and trying to find specific things, this is about taking these older paper records and migrating them systematically into a way, there you go, into an electronic form that is rigorous in terms of descriptors, in terms of things like dates, ID numbers. You can see the various fields there that are being gathered and standardizing them so that it's far, far easier to understand not just what's in the collection, but what might need to be prioritized by things like date, format, creator, etc. And then the next step is the next slide. You make a preservation plan. And Amy and I were talking about this image, and this is from one of the Apex projects. Was this from Chile? Where was this from? Was
Yeah,
Lima?
from Chile. Yeah.
From Chile. And we're pretty sure that the fellow is actually offering a silent prayer that the VHS deck will play back the tape. And if you're an audiovisual archivist, you have done that, whether silently or visibly. You have crossed your fingers or whatever to hope that you've done what you need to do to get the content, although I hate the word content, but that's really what we're talking about. The intellectual information, the history, the legacy, the story, the critical information off of that carrier and into a place where it can be more safely stored and, again, can be made accessible to the community. And core principles are pretty straightforward. Amy, if you want to move on to the next slide, or do you want to pause for questions? Amy, what do you think? Because I feel like I'm moving rather quickly, but this is very much just the top level of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'll add, just because I think this is such a great illustration of it, is that the community archiving workshops are really meeting institutions and collections where they are. So we're very aware of what best practices are for digitization, preservation, but we're also wanting to meet people where at a place where they can actually accomplish goals.
Yes.
Which sometimes does require saying a small prayer before you put the tape in the player, because ideally we wouldn't need to put the tape in the player. We would digitize it first. But sometimes you just need to see what's on it to be able to prioritize things. So we're really about like working within parameters of best practices and meeting people where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, that there are two kind of strains that you can think about is the in-house and out-of-house, and that if part of this might be helping an institution to write a grant to have material professionally digitized, that's one really positive outcome. Another positive outcome might be on a very different scale, depending on an institution or organization, helping them to understand what they might need to be able to do some of these things in-house. And, looking over the background on all these participating institutions, there's clearly a very wide array of skills and knowledge already at play here, and an extremely wide array of types of audiovisual materials. So yeah, I think, Amy, that's really well put about just meeting people, on their own territory, not just physically, but just logistically and mentally. That it's about making sure that everyone understands best practices in the field, and then understanding how they get translated into the real world.
Right.
And that's really what we're hoping to do. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do if we can.
So I think, Jeff, we should keep moving with the principles, and then we have a big chunk of time set aside for discussion. So let's plow through this section.
No, that's great, because this is actually relatively straightforward, these last few slides, because they're things that I've sort of been touching on. The first thing is about audiovisual collections and their care. The specifics of, as you can see in this diagram, what is a videotape or an audio tape made of? What are the reasons that it might decay? What does that decay cause in terms of playback? What are the ways that can be ameliorated? So it's very much about audiovisual materials. And again, it seems clear there's a very wide array of skills and knowledge within this group, which is terrific. And it's just about making sure that everyone is very comfortable handling these materials, being able to do things like visual assessments, understanding what the potential risks are, and really demystifying for lack of a better term, what's going on with an audiovisual collection. Because we've learned it, we can, it's not that, I don't want to say it's not that hard, but it's not that hard. It's about sharing a really specific knowledge about audio tape or videotape or film, so that there's an increased level of skill across the board, across both institutions and then across both the different types of media. I think the next principle that we were going to want to touch on here is the other really critical thing that goes beyond just the question of media, is this idea of each one teach one. I think that's Mona Jimenez, who's one of the sort of founding forces behind the cause. That's one of her favorite phrases, that it's about everyone gaining sufficient skills, comfort with the materials and knowledge to be able to pass it on to another person. And as the slide implies, and as we've talked about, the genesis was having all these audiovisual archivists in one place at one time and hoping that we could share our expertise so that the people we were working with could then pass that along to people who might be new at working with this type of material. And I think our next slide points to the other critical point that I had touched on, that as part of the workshop, it's about gathering the core data, the kinds of information we saw on that spreadsheet slide, about the collection and about its condition, getting it together in a single place. And this picture, I think, gives a sense, and some of the other materials hopefully you looked at give a sense too, of what it really looks like in process, that it is a very collaborative process of working together to look at materials and figure out questions that may not be clear, to figure out the way to most efficiently move through the most materials possible during a day, and really to work together through the process. And I think next slide touches on the other critical thing that we all know is essential, is that each item have a unique identifier, so that it can be tracked carefully. Again, we're looking at more old pneumatic tapes. They're everywhere. And once they've got unique identifiers, and once you can look at them at the item level, then you can begin to take the actions necessary to prevent the further damage and deterioration, some of which is going to be really obvious with things like physical damage to a case or water damage to a film. And some of them are things that'll have to be done in terms of broader priorities. We start with the oldest materials. We start with materials we know are not held anywhere else. But until there's that item level unique identifier, and I guess I should add that this is always rooted in any individual collection's needs and processes. It's not about coming in again and imposing, here's the absolute best standard, Library of Congress, et cetera, process. This is about what is the best process for this collection and how best do we do that. And that's the bottom line in that next slide, is we really want to leave organizations with the data about the collection, but also the inspiration they need to begin the preservation. Once these things stop, these collections go from being problems to being soluble problems. That, I think, is the goal. And as you go through materials, it is just having done eight or nine of these, it really is enjoyable and satisfying and a pleasure to really get a hold of what these collections are and really understand what the next steps are. Because once you dig into them, they get really, really fascinating and important. And again, it's clear from what I've learned so far, just a little bit that I've learned so far about the collections, there's a very broad range of what's known about the collections, what's been done, what hasn't been done. But the bottom line is about leaving behind the information that's necessary to care for the collections, and that sense of inspiration that this is something that can be done, and that this is knowledge that can be passed on to other people. So I think that's the end of my spiel, so to speak. Amy, have I left out anything? Do you think there's anything that I've talked about that you think we should elaborate on? Or
No, I think we'll leave it there.
Okay, good.
For that portion. And now we have some time to, I mean, if you think there's anything we should elaborate on, the question is to all of our regional partners.
Yeah.
What are you feeling confident about right now? What are you really feeling not confident about? And keeping in mind that you're still just being introduced to the concept, the in-person training will be a lot about getting you up to speed on the skills, the actual technical skills, and information about what audiovisual materials are made of, how to preserve them, but also just about this whole process and organizing a workshop, how to best prepare for having a big group of people come in and work on materials. So I'm wondering if anyone has any specific anxieties or fears about moving forward, about things that you feel like you really need to learn more about, or things that you're feeling really confident about. And if anyone wants to share anything, we can get a discussion started.
I'll start. This is Greg. So, I mean, I know that it's really my biggest concerns are kind of two-pronged. I'm not really worried about organizing a workshop. I actually know there's a lot of institutions throughout northern Wisconsin that have collected a variety of AV formats that have absolutely no idea what to do with it. Mm-hmm. For many of those institutions, I imagine their concerns are much bigger rather than the individual materials, because they grapple with day-to-day preservation of all of their collections rather than specifics, even though I'm sure they're aware that certain material types like AV have additional preservation concerns, or I should say different preservation concerns than some of the other materials that they have. But I think the bigger issue is really focused on resources, because I know that, here at UW-Eau Claire, we have probably something like 500 reel-to-reel audio, which there's some really great, valuable stuff right there, because back in the 1940s, we established a community forum where we brought in nationally and internationally recognized speakers to talk about topics. These forums are very common today, but we were one of the first academic institutions to do that in the world. And so we have this reel-to-reel audio dating back to the 1950s of prominent world leaders and others that, it's now approaching 70 years old and it's still in that original format, that I just don't know if we have the right equipment to be able to properly preserve that. And so I think that's one of my biggest issues, is this idea of resources. How do we get the resources here in northern Wisconsin to be able to help these institutions to address these very real needs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you're not the only one who feels that way. It's a common question that or common issue that comes up at the end of these workshops. But I think the model we set up is ideally to build a community of practice around this kind of digitization work, which might mean either being able to share equipment, and we are setting up, so we will have kits. There will be traveling digitization kits that will be available. I don't think we can do reel-to-reel audio on the traveling kit, but that's something that might be maybe the next kit, and maybe it can be shared throughout the state, so like once you guys are done, Milwaukee can borrow it for their collection, and like thinking of kind of trying to strategize together on these problems. I think that's what the goal of the community building is. Yeah.
That in my response to you, I told you that we have an old lyricist, Fred, that still works. It outputs a digital signal, which we then plug into a digital voice recorder and get a pretty low quality, but it is probably better to get something rather than to leave it in its current state.
Right.
And there's issues of the magnetic tape separating from the binder or whatever. And so it's, how do we go forward with reel-to-reel audio that has clearly been improperly stored and now has serious concerns about playback? So, I mean, those are the,
right.
It's just, it kind of starts with one problem and then it rolls to more and more. And so,
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any general or specific concerns or things they're feeling especially confident about?
From the Milwaukee Public Museum, I think that we do.
Don, you're breaking up a little bit.
Can connect, commit.
Yeah, Dawn, we're having trouble hearing you. It might help to mute your video. Sometimes that's useful.
Dawn looks frozen now. Okay, well, we can come back to Dawn when she's back on, when Dawn and Annika are back online. But if anyone else wants to jump in.
We're gonna try moving.
Oh, great. We actually hear you right now.
Is that very cool? We'll be settled in the
So this is Emily. I'll jump in with a question I had. It's, I guess, maybe more of a logistics question. So as we've been sharing the fact that we're a partner on this project and who our regional hosts are, I've had a couple of inquiries from other institutions about this is really exciting. Can I participate in the workshop? When are the workshops going to be? People wanting more information, which is, a good sign that they're engaged, but also just sort of trying to figure out, and maybe this is something we discussed when we were at the in-person meeting in July, of what the scope of the workshops, the local workshops will be, and who's, eligible to participate, and sort of those logistics of how we can help you three as local sites kind of plan and facilitate the logistics side of the events.
Yeah, I think
not really a question, is what
Emily. Yeah, especially in terms of when you're starting to think about, when every regional partner is starting to think about their own workshop, there's ways to, when you're thinking about volunteers to bring in to actually help you process the collections, there's a couple of ways to think about that. People who already work in your institution who might not know about these particular collections really well are great people to invite. But also beyond that, and this is what I think Emily is really speaking to, is trying to build your specific regional community. So if there are other institutions in your city, in nearby towns, who would like to get this expertise, like this is an opportunity to train them. So that's the train. Jeff, what is Mona's phrase?
One is one. I can never keep it straight.
But the concept that once you guys learn, it's up to you to pass on the knowledge. Mm-hmm. So Emily's already letting us know there's other people in the area who are really interested. So as much momentum as we can keep building around this, the bigger the community, I think the more we can help each other. And so as we're planning that, Jeff and I are going to be helping you plan these events. Like, we're here to be your mentors, and Emily as well, especially in terms of matching you up with other local interested experts, archivists, librarians, collection holders.
Right.
For sure. And we have, sort of the audience of, or the connections to a lot of these local cultural heritage institutions. So our contact network is definitely can be used for this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Connection, because we moved to, this is like the third room we've moved to. So hopefully this will work, but I think we lost part of the audio in our movement, so I'm not sure if I'm repeating anything. But one of the concerns was that the allocation of our time, for example, because we don't have anyone dedicated, for example, to archival work. And so as the curator of collections, my responsibility is, personally, is of over 425,000 artifacts within the museum and most of the exhibits, and I can go on and on. Everybody's busy, I understand that. And Annika is, also part-time commitment. Mm-hmm. So, through the training and through the development of this program, we're very interested and committed. And, and I'm going to plan on putting together an internal committee if we can. But this one, and to try and convince them this is a museum-wide endeavor rather than just the anthropology department endeavor. So that was one of my concerns, because I know as far as partnering, we have an amazing program through UW-Milwaukee and their MLIS program, for example. So graduate students through our Museum Studies graduate program, which we collaborate, with UW-Milwaukee. So I don't have that concern, and I feel Annika and I, whether we just don't have a lot of experience, of course, in doing that, but we have a lot of organization and we're quick learners. Mm-hmm. So those are I think important. So the time commitment is still an unknown, and I understand that, but it's still, for myself, it is a huge concern, because this is what we consider is almost an orphan collection that has never been really worked on fully. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we don't even have a complete estimate yet of our numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's not uncommon, unfortunately. Yeah. And also the time commitment. I think for Jeff and I too, like, a lot of these projects are coming, and not this particular project, but in the past, it's all usually volunteers. Mm-hmm. Like, we're often working with collections that are only worked on by volunteers. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the time commitment for this project specifically, I think Jeff and I, as your guides, we're good at getting it done fast. Okay. And I think we're really realistic about what's possible in what amount of time. So as we're planning your own workshop in Milwaukee, but it's good for us to know that, and we'll certainly keep that in mind as we're working with you. And I think you guys are in a particular advantage in a lot of ways because of the ways you can partner with students.
Exactly.
And get groups of people excited about your collections, and maybe start taking their collections, taking a little bit of ownership and feeling like they want to help you guys take care of the collections. That could be a great outcome.
Well, we're very excited because the focus of the collection that we're planning to work on is really our North American Indian collections. Mm-hmm. And so our hope is to partner with the tribes in Wisconsin where this is their heritage. Mm-hmm. So that is the primary focus. So we've already identified what part of the larger group that we're going to focus our initial energies on. But I also see this as not, I understand this is a grant, for example, but Annika and I believe we are moving forward. We see this as a multi-year sort of dedicated effort for our collections, but also to partner with others. So, we have that commitment, but as a priority, we really need to get our own house in order before, in some ways, I feel, rather than just trying to facilitate, just be the facilitator for other people's material.
Right. Yeah, I think for you guys in particular, a model could be to just do more workshops on your own collections
Yeah.
instead of training. And that can be the way that you train people.
Yeah, but training, training the native and indigenous populations that we work with, and because this is their heritage.
Yeah.
And so that is very exciting for us.
Yeah, great. Any other questions? We just have a few more minutes allotted for questions or any thoughts people want to share. Okay, we'll have plenty more opportunity as questions come up. So if you didn't think of anything now, that's fine. Or if you think of other things. So our last thing to do, wrapping up, is I just want to go over the plan for the rest of the summer and our work together. So the timeline, which everyone, I think I emailed everyone the link to the page that I'm going to be gradually updating with the training timeline. But here, just in a nutshell, today we've done webinar 1. In 2 weeks, we'll have webinar 2, which focuses on the CAW collaboration. So it's to get you thinking about who your collaborators might be when you set up your own workshop. So that's in 2 weeks. I'll be sending out details about that, but by the end of the week. There's a little bit of homework for that. It's less than the homework you did this time, just some things to look at. And then in July, the 24th to the 26th, that's when we're going to meet in person. Very exciting. And that will be in Madison. I'll be sending you all some logistics regarding the trip. Let's see, the locations. So we'll be largely at the UW-Madison iSchool, which is in the Helen C. White building, right on the lake. It's going to be beautiful, right next door to the terrace. So we can go have lunch there or have drinks or snacks. Your rooms are at the Fluno Center, which is a nice walking distance from the iSchool. And then on the day of the community archiving workshop that we do in Madison, that's going to take place at the University Archives. And I'll send you all of this information, but this is just to kind of give you an overview. At the Fluno Center, everyone has their own room. I'll send out the details about that. And every group will have a parking spot, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's see. And then we have our tentative regional CAW timeline. This can all change. I know Greg talked about wanting to do one in the fall, so that's why I have you down for the fall, but if that changes, that's totally fine. Basically, we just need to have them done by fall 2020. So we really have about a year. But all of this, if the timing of this becomes difficult for you, you just need to talk to us about it and we'll work stuff out. I had put Milwaukee and Appleton as spring, thinking that we'd maybe want to avoid the winter just in case traveling to each other gets difficult. Because of course the goal is for us to attend each other's workshops. I know it might not be possible in all cases, but there is funding set aside for you to attend each other's workshops. So if logistically and timing wise we can make it happen, it would be great because it'll get you a lot more practice. I know it'll be harder for everyone to get to Eau Claire, but it would be great if we could all make it up to see Greg and Crystal. And of course, Jeff or I will be at all of your regional workshops as well to help you.
Yep.
Let me make sure I got everything there. Yeah, okay. So our next meeting is in 2 weeks, Tuesday, July 9th. I will be emailing you instructions and preparation for that by the end of this week. And there's the URL for the in-person agenda is getting filled in gradually. Jeff and I are working on that now. But I'll email it out when it's finalized, as well as the logistics of just the hotel and what, the addresses and all of that sort of stuff. But if you have any logistical questions, please be in touch. I know if it was me, I'd want to know like what hotel I was staying. I'd want to know all the details already. So don't worry, you won't be bothering me. Just send me an email if you have any questions like that. And I'll also give you details on how you'll be reimbursed for your travel and like which meals will be provided, etc., things like that. So that's basically it for today. But there is still time if anyone has any questions, but if people need to leave, that's totally fine. But I can stay on for a bit longer if anyone has any other questions they want to address. No?
I don't have any specific question, but coming to this with next to zero knowledge, I'm just looking forward to learning from everybody and discovering your collections and starting the process.
Great. Thank you, Dustin. Yeah, I think we'll all learn a lot about collections we probably don't know about yet, which is one great advantage to working together, of course. Yeah, great. So thank you all for taking time today. Please be in touch if you have any questions. And I will be in touch before the end of the week over email.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Wow.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.